for joining today's evening discussion on transformation of Indian civil service, skill sets, change in approach towards citizens, and how to handhold citizen initiatives for a better urban standard of living. Bangalore being a tech capital, we've always seen a lot of innovations, especially in the field of governance and in other various sectors along with it. And we've also been very blessed to have a lot of civil servants who've been very proactive in citizen engagement initiatives. So all of us have had the pleasure of interacting with several of the officers who are on the panel today, and otherwise also in various critical initiatives that are very close to a citizen's day-to-day life. And we are right now addressing a problem of unprecedented complexity in urban areas, specifically more because of a lot of intra-country migration in tech hubs and cultural hubs like Bangalore. And it makes these issues more complex because of the pluralistic nature of and how demanding the governance structure can be. The systems and tools of governance and increasing use of digital and open network to address these issues have also required us to help build the skill sets of not only just the citizens and everybody else, but also of the officers. Today's session we have Mr. D. Randeep, who is an IAS officer, currently the Commissioner of Health and Family Welfare, Government of Karnataka, joining us. Mr. A.V. Surya Sen, IFS officer, Director of Bangalore Metropolitan Transport Corporation, BMTC. Mr. Nitin Pai, Director at the Takshashila Institution, an independent Center for Research and Education and Public Policy. And today's session will be moderated by Shri K. Jairat sir, our Secretary at Bangalore Political Action Committee, former IAS officer and additional Chief Secretary to Government of Karnataka. On that note, I would like to invite Jairat sir to begin the session.
Thank you, Harshita, and good evening to Randeep, Surya Sen, and to Nitin. Am I audible, Nitin?
Yes, sir.
All right. It's a great pleasure to be here this evening and to welcome all our distinguished guests on behalf of B.PAC, of which I am a founder, trustee, and secretary. I'd like to thank our B.PAC organizers for having got together this very important panel on a subject of importance to our state and to our country. And I'll just spend a moment in saying how pleased I am that, we have Nitin, Surya, and Randeep present here, because they bring a varied perspective to this issue. One from the administrative and public domain, and Nitin in terms of critical thinking and policy making and an entire international perspective. So it's good that we have brought together all these perspectives. By way of kicking off the subject, I was a little intrigued in the subject which read Indian Civil Service. I think we are done with the Indian Civil Service long ago. What I think the organizers meant was more kind of Indian administration. That's how the spirit I have taken this subject is. And in starting, I would like to put the following as posits. That today's civil servant, whether he is in the IAS or Forest Service or Foreign Service or police service, they actually require four kinds of things that are very critical. One is, a professional attitude per se that borders on competence, delivery, time consciousness, and the need to excel under extreme uncertainties. As I'm sure what Randeep is doing in health and family welfare in the midst of the pandemic, or Surya is doing in BMTC among the midst of all this digital transformation and the other public changes that we see. The second is what I would call execution excellence, a term coined by Ram Charan, the great management thinker, which says that basically no matter where you are, whatever be the constraints, you must be only known by the quality of execution. And whether you're in so-called policy making or implementation, execution excellence is critical. Thirdly is the skill sets that are required for today's officers functioning in the public domain. And by that, I'll say a little more as we go along. And finally, very important, I'm sure Nitin must be seeing it from the outside, but Surya and Randeep are seeing it from the inside, and Randeep has also seen it at close quarters in BBMP, which I would like to call stakeholder management. Once upon a time, this term stakeholder management was irrelevant. It didn't exist. The only stakeholder was your boss. But today, among a constellation of stakeholders, the boss is only one of them. So stakeholder management is important. So what are these skill sets that I would like to place before all of you, before I request your comments? The first skill set is really a positive attitude. And I won't now go into defining that. Then there is this digital competence, which is important today, which may not have been there in the yesteryears. The third skill set is one of harmonization, because there are so many contradictory things that come before you on a daily basis. How do you bring it together? And I'd also like to add the skill set mischievously a little bit. I know my friend Nitin will laugh. It's a skill set called longevity. Because basically, if you want to do well in any assignment, you must learn to get on with the system. I use the word get on in inverted commas. I don't want anyone to mistake me when I say it, but if you have to be effective, you have to have a reasonable stay in that particular assignment. So the organizers have said things like training, service delivery, capacity building, mission karma yogi, how you can be equipped for policy making. These are subjects which I think our panelists have gone through and are already ready and geared up. So without any more ado, I'd like to begin the discussion. I'll request each one of our esteemed panelists to make the first submissions in about 10 minutes to 12 minutes on whatever I have put forward, but you can depart from it and speak whatever is very important in your mindset. And I'd also like you to trace your own personal journey, because that will make you connect with the audience a little bit. Nitin, as an impartial observer of what he sees today and his experience in Singapore, where he dealt with what is called the world's best bureaucracy, Surya and Randeep for their experiences in the public domain. So I'll now begin, with your permission, with Randeep, who is the Commissioner of Health and Welfare Services and has done a distinguished stint in BBMP. Anybody who has done a distinguished stint in BBMP deserves our plaudits and congratulations. So, Randeep, over to you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for those kind words, sir. And it's not often that we get an opportunity to reflect on what we have done. And in fact, government keeps you so busy. The government work keeps us so busy. There's hardly any time to think and reflect. But you're absolutely right, sir. I think for the time that you have served in government in the various capacities, I think you have summarized it beautifully in terms of what today's civil servant needs to be. My journey has been probably having seen my father's era and your era, sir, of a bureaucracy. I entered with that kind of a vision of an all-powerful bureaucracy which could kind of narrate in what direction the public policy can be put, and in terms of the systems being in place. However, my journey in terms of after having entered the field was a mix of both. It did lead to a lot of commonalities in terms of what I expected, which were there in the field, and also some new learnings along the way, because one cannot be very rigid and think that I had this perception of bureaucracy, I had this perception of administration. It is not to my liking now, so what do I do? One needs to have that ability to course correct, ability to learn, And the best learnings have come from, if I can say, people whom I did not expect it to come from, probably from a corporator or probably from a common man telling me what they expected. I mean, there was this corporator who told me when I entered BBMP, sir, that the most successful commissioners in BBMP have been those who have forgotten that they are IAS officers and who have learned to work with us. The minute you carry the tag of an IAS to a public organization, be it a BBMP or a BWSSB, you tend to become something else which is not expected. So that was a huge learning. Another senior officer of mine, whom I have worked under and truly admire, gave me a very wise advice as I was stepping onto the field. And he said, Randeep, please remember, now that you are going to the field, and this I come to the point, sir, which you talked about longevity. And he mentioned that always be very clear on the battles that you need to take on and the battles that you don't need to. And do not invest your time too much in those unnecessary battles where you need to prove a point to somebody or where you need to just satisfy your ego. However, if it is a battle that you need to take on in terms of propriety, in terms of integrity, in terms of something which is very important in terms of public policy, by all means, put it across in a very diplomatic and a polite manner, but stay firm. So I think that advice kind of helped me along the way, sir, and that has kind of been the guiding force till now. The primary crux, what I could learn, sir, with my limited experience in the field and having worked in 2 to 3 districts as well as BBMP for a fairly long time, is the connect with the people is what makes one different from the other. And the service being such, it offers us a tremendous opportunity to be in direct touch with public at large, and that is where one sees some kind of an exchange of ideas, and we learn from them, they learn from us. There is an admiration in terms of what our limitations are, and we also get to know that what a genuine, what a citizen expects from us. So I guess that is very important, sir. And the digital revolution, of course, has changed everything. The bureaucrat is no longer faceless. The bureaucrat is no longer hiding behind the cloak of a minister. We are out there. We are answerable directly to the public, to the media, to the courts. That has exposed us completely. And gone are the times when we can say that do not come to my office, or do not tag me on social media, or do not send a message on WhatsApp. So we are equally accessible at any point of the day, which I positively take it, sir. I think this never before in the history as an Indian bureaucrat we so close to the public that they are able to reach us, reach the head of the department, and even if it, as in BBMP, sir, you would also appreciate you were there. Even a Paura Karmika could reach up to the commissioner and a chief commissioner. They could make a direct call and say that I have not received my wages, which was probably unthinkable maybe about 20 years back. So these are the good things, sir, that over a period of time that I have noticed, and change is the only constant in our service, and happy to learn from the others here as to how we can improve ourselves, keep changing, and ensure that, as you rightly put it, sir, the word of execution excellence. I think as long as we keep that goal of execution excellence in mind, everything else will fall into place, sir. Thank you.
Excellent, Randeep. Spoken with your usual felicity. Before I move to Surya and Nitin, I wanted to ask you 2 questions, Randeep, by way of clarification. Has your training in Mussoorie helped you in terms of, discharging your role efficiently and effectively? Question 1. And question 2, in the civil service, how do you kind of update and upgrade your knowledge and skill sets when you guys are grappling with so many live issues on a daily basis?
Sir, thank you for those questions. Sir, when I look back at my Mussoorie days, I think the one thing that the academy has taught me is patience to go through the files, sir, because they made us read so much and made us sit in those classrooms. Now it's very easy for us to go through those long files and the file notings and how to study a file, how to make the file notings, how to keep documents in place, how to respond, how to write DO data. So all those basics and fundamentals, sir, I think both Mussoorie as well as ATI, they have taught us well. These are the fundamentals, sir. I don't think we would learn them anywhere else. For somebody who says that training is not necessary and one can directly get into the field, I think that is a bit far-fetched. One requires the basic grounding, and we learn a lot of the softer aspects also in the academy in terms of interaction with senior officers from the field who is to come share their experiences. So absolutely, though it is about 14 years back, sir, I absolutely have very vivid memories of the academy days. And there were some of these inspiring talks, which to this day ring in my ears in terms of why we are in this service and how it is relevant that we continue doing what we are doing without getting disheartened by things happening around us. So that I think, sir, is absolutely relevant. And I'm sure a probationer today also would completely agree with me. On the second question, sir, it's indeed a challenge because people keep calling us generalists. We are definitely not specialists. There are many specialists on this esteemed panel. So we being in the Indian Administrative Service, we hop from job to job, post to post rather. We need to pick up those skill sets as soon as possible, sir. One day I'm handling revenue administration, the other day solid waste management, and all of a sudden public health. So each of this is comes with its own challenges, sir, with its own jargon, with its own specific topics that we need to get into. And there's no better way, sir. And I have only learnt it not through books fully, but interacting with my subordinates. So I have no qualms in asking my deputy director on what the subject is, how do I go about it, which is the place that I need to read up to improve my skills. So the maximum learning comes from people who are already good at it, sir. So I have no hesitation in learning from that. And that is the only way that I have kind of picked up on the job. And we need to continue reading, sir. One thing that I've noticed few officers, after getting into service, we stop reading newspapers, we stop reading general books, we stop watching informative programs. I think somewhere down the line, we need to ensure that we keep doing these things also along the way. Thank you, sir.
Excellent. Okay. Now, before I go to Surya, I want to switch to Nitin, because Nitin is the, he's the conscience of this panel, since he packs so many things in one role. So Nitin, how do you see this issue, Nitin, what we mentioned and what Randeep has so eloquently put it, as a interested outsider, but yet a critical functionary in the entire space?
Thank you, Mr. Jairaj, sir. I think one of the tricks you have always played on me is to blow up my credentials and then force me to live up to a much higher standard than I'm capable of. So yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, I'm not sure whether I can qualify to be a conscience or an expert in anything. But a couple of things I would like to share from my first innings as a civil servant in the government of Singapore.
Right.
And my second innings as a person who teaches public policy in this country. The fundamental realization I had was that any system, especially in government, has two types of people: good people and bad people. So good people will do good things, whatever happens, and bad people will do bad things anytime happens. How well a system functions is really an outcome of the resultant of the deeds of the good people versus the bad people. So if the resultant of the deeds of the good people exceeds the resultant of the deeds of the bad people, the system does well. but we allow the other way where the resultant, and when I say resultant, it's not just the numbers. It's not a mathematical number. There could be one good person in a organization of 100 people where 99 people do bad things. But if the actions of that one person have results which are so much greater, then that person can negate the bad doings of the 99 others. Right? Now, of course, this is a very oversimplified case because it's not good and bad. There are lots of gray in the middle. But I'm just giving an example as to understand that from my observation of the civil services of two countries and a little bit of some of the ASEAN countries as well. I think what is important for us is to emphasize the actions of the good people, strengthen the hand of the good people, and allow them to do things. Very often in our zeal and in our self-righteous zeal and sanctimoniousness, we do things that will block the hands of the good people. So what happens is the good guy is able to do nothing, but the bad guys being bad guys will do it anyway, right? So what you've done is you've tilted the balance in terms of, good versus bad, right? So I think the first do no harm, ensure that our good people, the talented people, people who have a conscience, people who are wedded to constitutional values get to do what they do, I think is very important. And here I see a lot of the civil society, NGO, media expectations trying very hard to constrain what the good people can do. Whereas the 99 bad guys are allowed to get away with whatever they are because people say, okay, we can't do anything about these guys, just forget about it. So let's hold the good people to account, and that has a negative effect. So I think the first thing which as a society, as B.PAC, as the Bangalore community, we have to try and do is to identify, nurture, and support the good people, both in terms of their career progression, as well as the actual deeds that they're doing. Very often we've seen officers being shuffled or transferred because they fall foul of some political, this is the power going off, so it will come back. So when they fall foul of the political establishment or the political interest or some local political grouping of one way or the other, we find people being moved. I think it is important for civil society to resist those things. You can't just allow, you can't just expect a civil servant to do good things for you. But when that person is moved, there is silence on behalf of civil society. So I think that is an important part of what civil society has to do. The second thing, carrying forward from what Mr. Randeep said, and Mr. Randeep, of course, as you said, is among our exemplary, both Randeep and Surya are among our exemplary civil servants today. So, I mean, if you draw a curve, these people will probably be in the top end of our expectations of what civil service have to be. But, when he said something about the academy, two things come to mind. And this is from my personal experience. I joined the Singapore government as a telecoms regulator, right a few months after qualifying as an electrical engineer. So I knew something about internet and IT. The government wanted it, so I joined them. And I spent one whole innings in the Singapore government using common sense, believing that, my engineering education will qualify me to make decisions about technology, etc. And I spent several years thinking that I'm the cat's whiskers, And then I went to the School of Public Policy. I went to the Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy. And in my very first semester, I realized how ignorant I was about many things about public policy, economic reasoning, for example, and only after that I realized, had I known this back when I started, I would have done things a lot differently. The outcomes would have been a lot different. Public interest would have been served a lot different. So the thing is, a lot of things in public policy are counterintuitive. Price caps, for example, classic example, price of some commodity goes up. There is a political and public pressure to keep the prices down. So public policy says, let's put a price cap. We will freeze the price cap and we will use enforcement to prevent hoarding, black marketing, etc. Now, what that does is it does not do anything about the supply. It diminishes the supply. It creates more black marketing. It creates more corruption, etc. Right? Whereas economic reasoning would have told us that don't interfere in the price mechanism, help people to get access to services, but don't interfere in the price mechanism in a way that makes problems worse. So I think a lot of our civil service training, whether it's in India or in Singapore or any part of the world, does not prepare us to understand economic reasoning, understand the specializations of disciplines, as you said, stakeholder management. It's a well understood subject in public policy. People teach stakeholder management, but it's not taught to us when we join the service. It's not taught to a civil servant, even if the person is 5-10 years into the service, is not taught. So you're expected to somehow learn it by osmosis, by talking to people. So my second statement, therefore, is I think there are a lot of simple things we can do to improve the curriculum, very broadly spoken, about the curriculum in public administration, both for people who are at the entry level, for people at mid-career, and also at the senior level. And this is again, as we say, as B.PAC and the rest of us who are stakeholders in the system, something that we can do to address. So how can we help bring competence, which are really technical things, but which are not taught in the academies? So those would be the 2 points I'd make now. Maybe we can talk about other things later.
So Nitin, just one question to you before we go to Surya. If you keep the Singapore civil service and the Singapore system on the one hand and what you see, at least from the outside, on the other in India, what is the balance of advantage that Singapore has, which we don't have?
Okay, I think first of all, I must tell you that it's the same beast. Okay, it's the same species of the same beast. There is no difference in the nature of the civil service. Both also have a colonial heritage, both also part of parliamentary systems, both have more or less similar hierarchies, training systems, etc. So I don't think there is anything different in the DNA of the two systems. But what luxury the Singapore government has, and India's governments don't, is that the constraints they have in terms of hiring, equipping, training, moving officers is much smaller. Social justice, for example, is not a priority. So the Singapore government does not have to worry about social justice at all. But India, constitutionally, we are bound to think about social justice, right? So once you bring in social justice, it makes things more complicated. Then you also have, for example, efficiencies of other parts of society, maybe the judiciary, maybe the enforcement mechanism. So if the judges have only 2 cases per day to handle versus judges who have 500 cases per day to handle, the kind of policies that you have to make, the kind of administrative actions that you need to take will be different, because you don't want to take actions which will add to the judiciary's burden, knowing fully well that the judiciary can't act. So, but the Singapore has the advantage of being a smaller, more efficient judiciary. So, things happen. Compliance culture is the other. And then one more thing, and I think we are solving it in the last few years, especially with Aadhaar and other things, is that, before Aadhaar and the others, if Jairaj comes to me and I go to Jairaj's office, how do we prove to each other that Jairaj is Jairaj and Nitin is Nitin? And how do we ensure that a document or a transaction made between Jairaj and Nitin is a legitimate document signed between the real Jairaj and the real Nitin? That simple problem of having an identity was lacking in India until a few years ago. And I think we've made some strides in solving it today. Not by all means, we've not solved it completely, but we are getting there. So things like as simple as establishing the identity of an individual, having trust in a document that has been signed, whether by a private party or by a government, all of those luxuries the Singapore government has that we don't. Right. So I think the way I look at it is that we have to take the world as we have it. We can't aspire to have the benefits which other people have, but we have to work with the advantages and the constraints of our system.
Excellent. Thank you, Nitin. That's well put with your usual felicity. Now I'll come to Surya. Surya, how do you see your journey, my friend, from where you started and where you are now, and what are your learnings and what will you pass on to us here in the panel and to those who are listening?
Yeah, sir, actually, I am a very young officer when compared to lots of people in the forum right now. I am a 2013 batch officer who is just 8 years or 9 years into the service, first of all. And the second thing is, even the existence of my service itself is a crisis. So, uh, I would like to start from there actually. So everybody knows like what is happening around us and how this whole system of all India service works. And I would just like to understand and tell people that the skill sets actually starts from the early education of the person, basically, because whatever training we speak, whatever the curriculum that we keep in service or mid-career or whatever, the real the vision comes when you are doing a primary or a secondary education, and what kind of a effort that we are going to put in at that moment is what which really makes the difference on a person who is going to become a good person or a bad person, in which atmosphere he is going to grow. Doesn't matter finally if you can really give him a good education in the beginning itself. So in that way, I am a little bit blessed because I could able to have a good atmosphere of a childhood, a parenthood. So I could able to pursue what I wish to pursue as a graduate. I studied in an agriculture university. I was not pressurized to go into an engineering or a doctor or a so-called professional course, even though agriculture is a professional degree. Nobody knows that. Then after that, I could able to do something which I again liked. I went into something which is nobody knows that exists, but very often talk about something called as remote sensing and GIS. So these are some things which out of curiosity that we study. And finally, I landed up into this service because I had no other option. After studying BSc as forestry, no other option but to land into the Indian Forest Service. So finally, I landed into Indian Forest Service, and many of you are aware that Indian Forest Service is one service that has very, very rigorous training program. So for 2 years, 2 full years, we spend our time in the academy where we do all technical education and we do all the administrative education. We learn lots of things, travel around the whole of the country for almost 6 months out of the 2 years and see different places, different people, starting from the lowest of the section to the highest of the corridors in the Rashtrapati Bhavan. So this is how the training is already given. So when you come into the cadre, then the real fight starts, and you know that, sir. The one thing which I need to stress here is the common sense that an officer has. Most of the time we learn lots of things, we could able to gain lots of knowledge, we could able to gain lots of exposure, but sometimes we forget to gain common sense. So this is something which all of us should understand and appreciate, that how to listen, how to speak, how to assimilate and process, and how to logically think. So these are some things which as officers sometimes we forget. This is one thing that's a major skill set that I say as an officer we should have, is the common sense that we should keep on updating it. Again, it is about updation that you asked Randeep sir, how you people are going to update it. So again, these are the things which we need to update again and again so that the common sense doesn't become obsolete also. So this is one thing, sir. Apart from that, there are lots of other challenges. As I said, Indian Forest Service, for example, is a service which is trying to find its existence in this country as on date, because nobody bothers about what is going to happen to the place we live in. And that kind of a scenario, as forest officers, we are having threats even in all directions, including politicians, including people. Multi-stakeholder problem, as we can see, is very much real for us. Actually, whenever you see in an assembly session also that all politicians come together and scold the forest officer rather than in any other sector for that matter. So when this comes, we are really in a very kind of a strategic position. Hello, sir. Good evening, sir. Yeah. In that way, sir, we are in a little bit more uncomfortable position when compared to other services, to bridge that gap and also to follow that equilibrium in this ecosystem. So I have to balance between the politician, I have to balance between my fellow colleague, IPS or an IAS officer. I have to balance between the common man who is getting affected. I have to balance between the whole environment which is getting affected, which includes the forests and the wildlife. So the balance is another thing which we need to understand how we are going to achieve that. Striking the balance. So something which as an officer we need to find out. So Randeep sir also has mentioned already on some battles that which we need to fight and some battles that which we should not even enter into. So there are these battles again in front of us. So we generally not like to fight, and we generally will take the back seat, even though if we are losers, we generally try to lose that battle so that in the future we try to win the war somewhere. So this is something which we, as a civil servant, which we should always keep in mind. And one more thing that we need to see is how best we are adapted to change. Because there are lots of comments on civil servants saying that you are mere status quoist. Again, there is one important thing as a civil servant that we need to understand is we need to be the change maker, be it good or bad. So again, the good and bad things comes, but still we need to do some change, whether it is good or bad when you are holding a post. So the implications, the other things doesn't matter actually, because as a civil servant, you are coming and sitting in a post. Definitely there is something which is expected out of you and not just the status quo. So we should be ready to take up that, and we should be ready to deliver, as you mentioned about the delivery, that we should be in a position to do some change out of the place that what we have sat, so that the chair is given the due respect of what we are posted for. So these are some things as skill sets that I can see, sir, as a civil servant, that we should process. And if there is anything else we can not add. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Surya. Those are very good comments from a young colleague, and I'm very happy to welcome my dear colleague, my friend for many years, Mani Vannan. Welcome, Mani. It's a pleasure to have you. Mani is a very senior member of the service today. He is principal secretary, and the good thing about Mani has worked for me earlier. The good thing about Mani is, he's a people-friendly, proactive, and outcome-oriented individual. Wherever he has gone, that's what he's done. So, Mani, to bring you up to speed with our discussion so far, we've heard Randeep, we heard Nitin give us a perspective, and Surya about, one, how did they get where they are now? And two, what are the skill sets and what are the requirements of being effective in your job? And three, how do you see the future? What do you think are the requirements of an effective civil servant? These are the three things we've been discussing so far in a nutshell. I'm glad to acknowledge your presence. And would you like to say something, Mani, please?
Good evening, sir. First of all, my apologies for joining late. How this social welfare department works. So they almost hound you till you leave the office. So apologies, sir. In fact, you are one of the reasons why I agreed to join, because listening to you is a pleasure. Being with you is a privilege. I thought that I would again revisit the good times I had with you, sir. You have been so kind in guiding me. I still remember the drive from the Chief Minister's house to Vidhan Sauda one evening after we had a long chat with the CM. When he talked about the how far you have to stay from the fire, how close you can go and how far you have to be there. So I remember that, and it actually helped me a lot when I worked with so many ministers after that. I always maintained that optimal distance, and I realized that there has to be a balance. So the balance is not only in being close or away from a person, but it's also being close and away from the responsibility you hold. So when we take things very close in our profession, then we are not able to detach when the time comes for detachment. So particularly in a public service, when we have to move from one place to another place without our our wish, you have been removed from one place, I would say, and planted to another place. One requires that detached attachment to be able to perform the work in a better way. I've seen people who have been transferred, not able to come out of it. They spend at least 1 or 2 months to fit into the new role. So there's a huge loss if you see the way, sir. So thanks a lot for giving all those wisdom, sir. And another thing you said is about closing the communication, which helped me a lot in dealing with the public. Why I'm saying public is now, I think we all agree that we have come to the era where we have to work along with the citizens. So those days of being a provider to the public, giving, doling out things to them, I think is being converted, metaphors into a system where you have to sit with the public and work together. Okay, this is the issue, how are we going to solve it actually? So that would require a sense of what I just now talked actually. So we need to communicate first of all. If we do not communicate, then we are starting with zero. I mean, we are not even able to cross the first step. So communication and closing the loop is extremely important. In fact, many people ask me, how do you respond to each and every WhatsApp message you get? So I tell them that, I only told Salma about you that I learned from Jeda sir, but others I didn't say. So somebody is communicating to you because they want something from you. If you don't respond to them, however important or unimportant they are, then that leaves something, a gap is created between you and the person. He tells somebody else, and you are creating a wall around you. With a wall around you, which we bureaucrats are very comfortable inside the fort, but that is the first enemy of interacting with the public. And that's the first enemy in when you wanted to collaborate with somebody. So closing the communication is extremely important, and that's what I have learned, or I would say, when I joined as assistant commissioner, worked in Tumkur, and now what I'm doing as secretary here. One learning is that these forts we construct around us, no more work actually. For whatever reason we hold it, maybe to protect us, or maybe I don't know what is the reason why we create it, but we all think we are different from others in some way, and we try to build this. So this has to be broken. It was a painful thing, I would say, because after coming to Bangalore, after being DC and with all the aura, the red light and all, you come and join as a director and commissioner, and you have to, you realize suddenly that, okay, I am actually doing a job, like somebody else. So that requires, there's a painful process to come out of that and behave like a normal man. So now I take a lot of pains to ensure that I travel in the metro, and I try to become as normal as possible, because that is required to collaborate with people, sir. So these are the two things I have learned, and I'm very fortunate to work with people like you, Vinay Kumar sir, A. Ravindra sir, who have been, they were excellent guides actually. You just observe them, you learn a lot of things. So this is what I want to communicate and share with you, sir. Now, thank you very much for the chance.
Super. I want to now go around and ask Nitin to start with. Thank you, Mani. That was excellent. I have lots to tell about you, Mani, but we'll reserve it for some other occasion. I wanted to ask Nitin. Nitin, how do you look at the issue of personal philosophy, which an effective civil servant must have in this context, where there's a lot of conflict, where there's a lot of seesaw, and compare it with Singapore, for instance, where it's a quote-unquote homogeneous society. So give us some thoughts on this subject.
Yeah, Mr. Jara, I don't think, Singapore is not homogeneous. Singapore also has diversity, but it is managed, I would say it is a consciously managed, bureaucratically managed diversity. Whereas our diversity is not managed at all. We give free flow to diversity. So, but I'm glad you asked the question about personal philosophy, because I always, in fact, even in the B-Clip classes with B.PAC, this is something which I share with anybody who works with public affairs, public policy, whether it's a civic leader, whether it's a government official. And this is based from my own experience as well, But, Indian philosophy gives us two very interesting classes. One is called Swadharma, right, which is your personal dharma, and Rajdharma, which is the dharma of you as a governor, as a ruler, and an administrator. And it is in Indian philosophy itself, these are very two distinct categories. Swadharma is not Rajdharma, right? For example, even in the Arthashastra, for example, You know what Kautilya says? The Kautilya says you as a king might worship any god that you want, but let's say you have acquired a particular kingdom, you should treat their gods as your own and respect them. You know, he's saying that you should, their gods become your gods, you know. So what he's basically saying, it's not, I mean, you can interpret it religiously, but philosophically what he's saying is you should adopt their ways. Don't try to enforce your personal views, your personal sense of right and wrong on the people that you're governing. The people have their own sense of right and wrong, whatever that is, right? So Raj Dharma and Swadharma is very different. I'll give you another example from a B.PAC class, which might be very instructive in times like this. So in one of the B-clip classes, I was talking about prohibition. And I started by asking in the beginning of the class, you know, there were 50 people in the class. This might take about 5 minutes. If you allow me, this anecdote is useful. Can I just take 5 minutes for this anecdote?
Please go ahead, Nitin.
Okay. So in this class of 50 people, you know, I asked this question: how many of you think that alcohol should be banned and prohibition should be imposed? So about 7 people raised their hands. Others were, I think, too shy to raise their hands. We're having a power cut, so it should be back again.
Go ahead.
So one of the persons who raised his hands, I asked many of them. So some people said it's against tradition. Some people said it's because people drink alcohol and beat their family members and so on. But one person was a very, very conservative Muslim, because you could make out from his clothes. You know, he was dressed with a long beard and skull cap. He was a conservative Muslim. And I asked him, why do you think alcohol should be banned? And he said, look, according to my religion, you know, alcohol is haram, so we should ban alcohol. So I went through the class. After the class, during the class, I explained how prohibition causes an underground industry to develop, corruption to take place, huge tragedies to happen. And then there are pros and cons of prohibition. And it's not so clear cut that prohibition is the answer to all the social evils that you have. So at the end of the class, it's a B.PAC class, so I asked the class again, now how many of you are in favor of prohibition? So out of the 7, only about 4 people raised their hands. But this particular person, he was a senior citizen. I mean, he was 60 something years old. He was much older than I was. And I asked him, sir, just now when we started, you said due to religious reasons, you want to have prohibition, but now you say no. Then I asked him, so what is the reason? What changed your mind? Religious principles haven't changed in the last 45 minutes. So he said, I agree with what you said. I, as a believer in my religion, firmly believe that alcohol should not be drunk. I will certainly impose this in my family and whoever I have a control on. I do not want me and my family and my community members to drink. I will do whatever I can to promote the idea of non-drinking. But I will not allow prohibition, because now I realize that prohibition has more social ill than the goods, right? So to me, it showed that, you know, it is very easy for even people who are very conservative, traditional, to understand that there is a difference between your swadharma, which you might, you know, believe your food habits, your clothing habits, or whatever that is, and your Rajadharma, which is you as a leader, as an administrator, making rules for society. So I think, you know, if people are able to make this distinction between individual dharma and Rajdharma, I think we'll be doing a much better job in public administration. And if question arises, what is Rajdharma? I think it is very simply written in the preamble to the Constitution of India. The Rajdharma of any administrator or a civil servant in India today is written in the preamble of the Constitution. You don't have to read the rest of the Constitution. Just read that one page and the dharma is there. And all we have to do is follow what is written in that document. We might not agree with everything that is written there, but that is the dharma which is laid out for us.
Fantastic. Let me pose this to Mani. Mani, are you there or have you gone back to your files? There he is. Mani, how do you see this issue of personal philosophy? No, Mike, Mani, Mike. You're on mute.
1 minute, I'll back with you, sir. Just
let me ask Randeep. Randeep?
Sir, absolutely relevant point, sir. I think many a time our personal biases, personal thoughts about how we should be does affect us. I mean, though consciously we may like to say that it doesn't matter, I'm neutral and all that, these personal biases do creep in. It is very important. That is why public feedback is very important. We need to have stakeholder consultations, take feedback of your subordinates, then come to a conclusion. I mean, we can't come with this thought, and things are so dynamic. We have experiences from across various cities. So as long as we are open, sir, and we are clear, except those extreme cases where our stand has to be absolutely clear. Most others are gray areas where I think we should ensure that our personal biases and judgments do not come into the decision-making process. And we need to take finally, in terms of what is good as a public good, it's a larger good, Bentham's basic philosophy. I think if that is put into force, sir, I think things will fall in place.
Mani, are you there to respond now?
Yes, sir. Sir, I heard Randeep, I heard Nitin. While yes, I also love to say that we have to keep our personal beliefs and the professional beliefs different, but it is not easy at all the time, sir. I mean, like, if there's a conflict between your personal belief and what you're expected to do in the work, then it keeps nagging you, actually. It keeps nagging you, and after you take it, of course, we have to go by the professional belief, because if you're going to impose your personal belief in your profession, then somebody is going to get back at you. Because, sir, the conflict means that you are going to do something which is professionally not acceptable, but personally believe it to be right. So even if we impose mine on that, nobody's going to accept it. If I write something on the file and send it, they're going to send it back to me saying that, Mani, this is not correct, actually. So I have to compromise. I have to keep it to myself, and I have to write something else in the file. I will feel bad about it. I mean, let me open about it. Whatever happened, the hijab issue now, my personal belief is different from the government's view. I have gone by whatever the government said, because that's a professional philosophy, but it keeps nagging me, actually, and it does affect my work to some extent. So I think that so far we do not have a release mechanism. We don't have a safety valve where we have to have a like we have IAS organization group, but they don't have a safe place, sir. I think professionals should have a safe space where we can talk openly, vent out our conflicts, actually, which we don't have now. There's a need for that, actually.
Absolutely, and that's brilliantly put about a safe space. And before I ask young Surya, I want to tell you that, we were very fortunate, Mani and Randeep, in the sense that, honestly, there wasn't the conflict between personal belief and professional belief as much as there is now. And more importantly, you guys are working in a very adversarial environment because of 24/7 TV, press, everything you do is torn and, pilloried and put in the TV. So it is very important for you to develop the stoicism that's required of an effective civil servant. But let us ask Surya for his perspective, because he is still fresh off the block. So he probably will have something to contribute in terms of what he does to enhance his repertoire. Surya?
Yeah, sir. Sir, actually, yeah, see, what Mr. Nitin was telling about this two things, the personal and the professional philosophies. So I mentioned, actually, the personal philosophy should always match with the professional philosophy. And this comes only with the upbringing. So again, I am stressing on this because unless otherwise we have this uniformity in personal and professional philosophy coming together, we will always be facing the issues which Manivannan sir has quoted. So that exactly is the problem that we are facing as on date, because we have a personal philosophy which is matching with the professional philosophy, but still we are facing the issues which are, even though which can be professionally handled, but still we are facing the nagging. Even though the professional philosophy is very clear in the constitution that we are going to serve, but still we are having these kinds of nagging because of other influences. So in that way, we are very clear. All of us are in the same page. At least the personal philosophies matches with the professional philosophies. But most of the officers don't have that, and they have it a little bit more challenging in the case of serving the public at large. So that is the issue which we are facing now.
Mr. Jairaj, I just want to respond to something with Mr. Manivannan said. My heart goes out to officers like Manivannan who have to, perform their duties under such, as you said, under deeply polarized, deeply conflicted circumstances. But, the Constitution was supposed to save us, right? Dharmo rakshati rakshata. The Constitution was supposed to save those people who support the Constitution. But the goalkeepers of the Constitution, the wicket keepers of the Constitution, in this case, I would say is the higher judiciary, has failed us, has failed society, has failed civil servants. Because see, ultimately, politicians will do and exercise power as they've been exercised. Civil servants will stay within the line, and a good civil servant will follow the political line, because the politician, for good or evil, is the duly constituted authority. So civil servants can't cross that line. But if the judiciary, whose main mandate is to protect the spirit and the letter of the Constitution, decides that it has other priorities, or decides to interpret the Constitution in the light of popular whims and fancies, I think we are done for. So I think as much as the safe space which was talked about, I think we need to have greater public pressure on the judiciary to act according to its constitutional remit. Justice Roberts of the US Supreme Court once said, it is not the job of the court to protect people from the consequences of their political choices. So, it is the job of the judiciary is to interpret the Constitution. And that's not what is happening. They are going, in general, going by everything other than strict constitutional interpretation at a time when we need it most.
Excellent. So this has been a very fascinating discussion where we have so many perspectives and very frank exchange of views. I have one question from the audience I want to pose. Randeep, I'll begin with you and then I'll ask Mani to respond. Bangalore is far ahead in innovation, but most of citizens facing innovation fades away quickly as the system fails to build public participation trust due to failures in execution. Randeep, in the wake of what you managed in the pandemic recently, Mani was also very much a part. Would you like to respond to this?
Sir, I think digital tool is an enabler, sir. At the end of the day, your execution excellence, sir. We have seen what Mani sir has done in Hubli Dharwad Corporation. Any department that he goes in, sir, the first thing he does is connect with public, and he connects digitally. Be it Twitter, Facebook, WhatsApp, he is accessible. He is accessible to the last man on the street. That is the first, sir. If that intent is there, then everything else falls. Digital, these are all enablers. These tools are available. Probably, sir, at your time, you didn't have the luxury of these tools. We, as younger bureaucrats, we now have this access. Of course, it's a double-edged sword, but still we can make best use of that, sir. Officers have shown us. But at the end of the day, sir, it's also the intent of the officer, how best he would like to use this, how he'd like to engage with public on a continual basis. I have seen in SWM, sir, in BBMP, that the minute you connect, I had my junior health inspectors on Twitter responding to public. If there's a photo of a garbage, then immediately you had a junior health inspector responding, going and cleaning it up, putting a photo back. And the guy who complained used to feel absolutely thrilled that his grievance got resolved in just a matter of seconds. So I believe, sir, that wherever technology to be used, we in Bangalore, if we do not use it, we in Karnataka, if we do not use it, we are the losers. Of course, that is not the be all and end all of it, because technology again has its limitations, and it is how best that we use it. It will deliver to that extent.
Mani, any response on that?
Sir, I think Randeep has put it in a very balanced way. I would agree with him. It is a double-edged weapon. Technology when you use it to connect with public, I would say one thing, sir. I think that in spite of the pitfalls it has, we should embrace it. The reason being that the loss that occurs on the trust of the trust towards the government is much more compared to the small inconvenience you have to put up with connecting with the people on the social media or whatever it may be. Because I see this way, sir. If you do not connect, how much trust you add between the people and the government, and if you connect with them, how much trust you add. So when you connect with the people, you reply to them, respond to them, even though you may get a lot of flack, actually, you contribute to building the trust between the government and the people. And that's extremely important, sir, because I mean, you have seen everything. The entire government machinery runs because the people trust the government. The minute the trust comes down, then the government do not have a local standard to how govern the people.
Excellent. Surya, any quick comments?
So that is true, sir. Actually, see, digital innovation again is a matter of change. So digital innovation, like technology evolves, the innovation also evolves. So it's the systems that we need to address and not the innovations. So what kind of a delivery mechanism that we are planning, what kind of a system that we are building for that delivery mechanism, how are we going to reach the citizen in a systematic way? The systems in which we are building that matters, and not the real technology or the digital forefront which matters actually.
Okay, I have a final question before we wrap up, because we are running short of time, and this I want to ask each one of you to respond quickly, because in my opinion, this is going to stare us in the face as we go forward. I'll begin with Nitin. My question, Nitin, is this. Conflict is endemic in the system. It is staring in the face. And how do we manage conflict and yet remain effective within the organization, outside of the organization? Any comments, Nitin?
Both from theory and from practice, I think the most important conflict management instrument we have is a common set of values. If we can say that these are the common set of values and goals that we all subscribe to, and keep reminding ourselves that these are the common values and goals, conflicts are easy to manage. I mean, for example, if we have to decide that we have to, let's say, provide drinking water to a bunch of people. Now, one person can say, let's provide piped water. Somebody can say tanker. Somebody can say, let's give them bottled water and supply it every day. Now, these three people are arguing on a method on delivering that water supply. But if there is common understanding that all that matters is we need to ensure that each citizen gets, 200 liters of water every day or week, whatever that number is. If we have that common agreement, then there is an arrangement for us to manage that conflict of which is the best way to get it. But if there is no common agreement that water has to be delivered, then I think we are going to lose the plot. So I think India, we are at a stage where that common understanding of what we need to deliver to citizens, what is the public interest, is being severely contested. And which is why I want to refer back to say that we should go back to what's written in the preamble of the Constitution of India. That gives us a common set of values and goals that we can ultimately refer back to when there is a situation of conflict.
Excellent. Randeep, quick comments on the management of conflict as you have seen it, and what will work?
Tough question, sir. I think it is very, each one is a different ball. So there have been conflicts where I have to personally kind of take a back foot and say that, okay, I wish not to engage in this conflict and give it a go by. It's like playing a bouncer, sir. Either you hook it, or you let it fly past you, or you duck it and say that I can't play this. So I do not know how to handle this, sir. Others, I think, have kind of better experience. But I would say, sir, that let the bouncer not take you out. I mean, it's not, I don't believe that one conflict should decide our entire state of mind or get us demoralized. The idea is to stay in there, stay long. There are battles you will win. There are battles you will not face up to the satisfaction. But the common values, which is repeatedly been talked about by them also, I think that should not be lost sight of. Anything that hits the fundamentals, the core, the ethos, I think every single public servant, for having sworn by the constitution of this country, we should not compromise on those values. But anything apart from that, which is in a gray area, I think each one should find his or her own way to battle them. Thank you.
Mani, you manage so many conflicts, so you better tell us quickly what is the golden
I wish I had the wisdom what Randeep has at his age, sir, actually.
Mani has got caught into several bouncers. Randeep.
Yes, sir, you're right, sir. So, sir, I will have only one point to add what Randeep has talked about, is that why does the bureaucracy, I mean, we do not have a support system, sir. If there's a support system, I will be able to handle my conflicts in a much better way. In absence of a support system, when you have to fight alone, I feel like a general in the battle who doesn't have any troops with him. So then you then what do you do actually? Then if you still want to go to fight, you look as a fool. So it's a matter of you. Sir, it's I need not elaborate, sir.
No, you're right, Mani. We do need a support system. But you guys have managed your conflicts well. I've seen you, Mani. You come out victorious in many cases. But let's hear Surya, because he's in the early overs of the game. So let's hear him.
Yes, sir. In the early overs, you tend to hit hard, sir, actually. So that's why I ended up here in Bangalore. So I was even posted as DCF headquarters before BMTC. So I was in the headquarters for some 18 days of time. So it's tough only, sir. So conflicts really come. Yeah, that is true. And the best part of conflicts is that, sir, you tend to see different places, and for good officers, definitely you have opportunity to work anywhere. So there is no bad posting in the government. So government gives you every posting as a good posting. So generally it doesn't matter even if you get into a conflict. That is what my take is. So you try to hit it hard. If it comes, yeah, it's your six. If it doesn't come, yeah, you can go to the next chair and you can have some fun. That's all. So that is how I see it actually. Yeah.
Great. So I was just thinking to myself, Sharath, if you're still listening, that this is a master class with 3 outstanding administrators and Nitin Pai, also a outstanding critic, if I may say so, but also a very good person who can synthesize. And, I would suggest, Sharath, that, this is widely disseminated among your B-Clip and other classes, because this is really a master class in public policy and implementation. And like this, you feature others. Incidentally, we need more diversity in the panel. So get people and let us look at issues of service delivery. Let us look at issues of, urban planning and transportation, mobility. And, there are people within the system and also in Bangalore whom we can source, and we can have these kinds of discussions. And that will add actually to the stock of B.PAC substantially. And it is my very, very great pleasure and privilege to thank Nitin Pai, to thank Surya Sen, D. Randeep, and my dear friend Mani Vannan for their outstanding participation. It really has stimulated me. I wish I were young again, but then, we can't change the clock. But anyway, I wish you all the very best in your assignments. And thank you, Nitin, for your cooperation.
Thank you.
Over to Sharath. Sharath? Well, thank you for sharing your...
Thank you, sir.
So shall we conclude now, Sharath?
Yes, sir. Thank you very much for all the panel members, and especially to Jairaj sir to moderate it in a manner. It brings out all the positive outcomes that we see from the servicing officers. Several times, the citizens are at a verge of engaging with the officers in negative notes, but we have some exemplary officers who have done
Absolutely.
Good use of their officers, have demonstrated how citizen participation can also be constructive. Sincere thanks on behalf of B.PAC to all the members who took time to participate in this discussion. Your point is noted, sir. We would continue to organize these kind of engaging conversations on the topical subjects of Bangalore related subjects. And once again, thanking all the members and especially you for moderating and taking this discussion. And we request for a conclusion of this meeting. Thank you all.
Namaskara. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having us.
Take care and stay safe.